In the Middle East, the death toll in Gaza stands at more than 100 after 4 days of airstrikes by Israel. Hamas and now militants in Lebanon have fired rockets into Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says international pressure won't stop him from taking action. CCTV's Roee Ruttenberg is live in Tel Aviv with the latest. And Roee, the parts have been moving, but how likely is an Israeli ground offensive into Gaza?
Well, we heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking on Friday evening, speaking to journalists directly, but effectively speaking to the Israeli people. What we heard was references that Israel will do everything it must do to end the firing on Israel from Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that he wants quiet and calm in Israel, not just for 5 minutes. Now, it's important what he didn't say just as much as what he did say, which is he didn't make clarifications of whether or not there would be a ground incursion. We saw lots of troops arriving in southern Israel at their bases in the last 24 to 48 hours. And we heard from the Prime Minister saying all options are on the table. Now, this can be quite a deadly situation. The rockets from Gaza continue landing in Israel, more than 100 since this escalation about 4 days ago. And Israel has targeted, it says, more than 1,000 sites in Gaza since this all started. A ground incursion is something that many Israelis and many members of Netanyahu's cabinet have been calling for. They say this is not a cyclical movie that can happen every few years. They want the firing to stop, and to stop for good.
Well, the last time Israeli troops went in was more than 5 years ago. How might this be different?
Indeed, and we have to remember there was the escalation in 2008 and 9, which lasted for 3 weeks. That included ground and air attacks. In 2012, there was 8 days, which was just air attacks. Now, in that escalation, 180 Palestinians were killed. In the ground offensive that lasted for 3 weeks, so a little more than 2 times as long, 1,400 Palestinians were killed, a death toll that was nearly 10 times as much. So a ground-to-ground combat would, of course, be a lot more dangerous, both for the Israeli soldiers going in and, of course, for the local Palestinian population. Israel says that it can target strategic sites from the air with certain precision, and of course Netanyahu on Friday reiterated that that is what Israel is doing, saying that there are civilians lost in those strikes, blaming Hamas for putting civilians in harm's way. Sending in ground troops presents a much more logistical problem for Netanyahu, for the Israeli government, and of course, at least in Israel, many believe that Hamas and the other groups are trying to lure Israeli troops in to try to inflict more damage. We'll see in the coming days what happens here.
All right, CCTV's Roee Ruttenberg in Tel Aviv.